It has been posted?
Well, I'm going to do roll call first. Can we do that?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Commissioner Armstrong?
Here.
Commissioner Boley?
Here.
Commissioner Coronado?
Here.
Commissioner Diaz?
Here.
Commissioner Goodman?
Here.
Vice Chair Navarro?
Here.
Commissioner Pace is absent today. Commissioner Wright Durand is absent, and Chair Young.
Here. Thank you very much. Regarding the posting of agenda.
The agenda for today's meeting was posted at City Hall, the city's website, and the Leisure Center by 5 p.m. last Thursday, July 12th, as required by established policies and procedures.
Great. Thank you very much. Regarding the minutes, has everybody had a chance to review them? Are there any changes or any alterations? Yes.
Vicki, under page 6. My question, page 6, my question in paragraph 5 to David was, how much would this save us in insurance, liability insurance? And he went around and said, yes, we have liability insurance, and went on. The question was, how much would it save us, not do we have it?
Okay.
And a change that I noted, unless you had a meeting without me, I attended all the meetings, and for some reason it shows 9 for me, and as opposed to 10.
Yeah, I need to go back and check that because that was kind of weird. I must have missed.
May have slipped a line or something.
Yeah.
Commissioner,
Yeah, can you check mine also?
Okay.
And then I had a question, actually. I read through the minutes, and I'm just curious about some of the finer details that are either grammatically incorrect or they're positioned in the sentence that wasn't exactly the way it was said. Is this the time to do that, or do you do that, should we do that on the?
any correction to the minutes would have to be at this point in time.
Okay.
Is there
I
any
was
request for a change? If you've got something specific that you can request be stated differently?
Okay, so I just wanted to ask that question. I don't have anything at this time.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. With that being
Yeah.
said, if we can,
I went back a number of times and kept going back and trying to hear what people were saying. And there was one point, a number of people were talking and no mics were on, so there was a whole portion I totally missed.
I'd like to move that the minutes be accepted with the corrections.
Second.
any opposed, any abstaining?
Abstain.
Abstain. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstain. Thank you. Vicki, do we have any correspondence today?
We do not have any for today.
For public comment, this is the time that's been set aside for members of the public to address Parks and Recreation, the Commission, on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Although the Commission values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned to each speaker as you come up and sit just across from me. If you will introduce your name and your city, it'd be great. Thank you very much. Please step forward.
Thanks. Hi, I had knee surgery. My name's Mary Barcelow, and I just moved to Cathedral City. I just retired from 37 years of teaching in the Tustin Unified School District, and I'm very excited to retire in the desert. I just want to introduce myself as an incoming fellow ambassador along with the Mangionis to help them out with the big events with pickleball. If you can see my t-shirt, you can tell I play pickleball. I've worked with Vicki a lot. She's done a great job helping me with running round robins at Duluth. We've had 5 or 6 so far where go and play with every meet people. You don't get eliminated. You get to play all day for a very low cost, and I give prizes, and it's very social. And I'd like to continue doing that along with being an ambassador, and I'd like to really focus on working with the public schools. Since I'm a retired athletic director, physical educator, I know some of the teachers out here. I'd love to put in some free clinics and things for the high schools. I did a clinic for 100 adaptive PE teachers in LA last month and had 6 people helping me, and we had a great response for one of their professional growths. So that's one thing that ambassadors do. We promote the sport across the country. And that's kind of what I'd like to see as my role here. And I just wanted to come and introduce myself as someone who just moved to the area. And that I'm going to be working with Dean and Nancy, and they're going to mainly work inside, and I'll work with the schools and outside. And there's many people that will help with the big events. And I also sent an email retracting, saying, being all excited about Ruth Hardy, we are certainly willing to run our round robins at Duluth. I love it there. So that's what I've done, 5 round robins there. We usually have about 115 to 120 people. If any of the city's interested in doing a contract vendor program, I have that set up with Irvine and El Segundo already, where you get a cut of the profit instead of me taking all the costs for facility, prizes, insurance. That's certainly what other cities are doing. If you want to see some income from the events that I run, I just do social round robins. I don't do sanctioned tournaments. But if you're using city facilities, you certainly want to get in on how much money's coming in. So I just thought I would help you with that also. And if you have any questions, I'll be here for everything else. So again, Mary Barcelo, Cathedral City, just moved here. Just 4 weeks out of knee surgery.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Thanks, Mary.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Nancy Mangione, and with my husband Dean, we're the USAPA ambassadors for Palm Springs. My family moved to Palm Springs in 1958. I started school at Catherine Finchie and played in Ruth Hardy Park, which at that time was called Tamarisk Park. Our son attended Catherine Finchie and played in Ruth Hardy Park, as our first home was a block away for 13 years. Regarding the indoor pickleball gym programs, we have provided, totally at our own expense, a welcoming and extremely diverse pickleball program with 100% profit revenue stream for the Parks and Recs, because we take no split. We need more courts, as you're all aware, and as a body, you know, you've kind of gone in circles regarding this need. First, grant money was offered to us by Vicki if we started a kids program, and then it was reneged. We started the program, but it was reneged due to the budget concerns. Second, Ron Dale from the Lions Club came and spoke with you all and offered to sponsor additional courts. His brother-in-law is the videographer for Pickleball Channel, so he saw the potential, and we were told at that time he did not want to give up open space. Third, the first task force sent us out to tape off possible new tennis courts at Duluth so that the old courts could be converted to pickleball, but you decided pickleball needs to share with the tennis players who could walk to Duluth, which I totally agree with. Using that same logic, why is it then that we are not welcomed at Ruth Hardy Park, where the signage states for tennis and tennis-related activities? The USTA has stated pickleball is a tennis-related activity. Excuse me. I was diagnosed with melanoma skin cancer 3 years ago, and this is why we started the indoor programs to avoid additional sun exposure. I have really enjoyed playing at Ruth Hardy Park on the weekends when the gym is not available, as 2 of the courts are extremely shaded in the morning, which I've been told is undesirable for the tennis players. In fact, the tennis players directed us to those 2 eastern courts as they are the least desirable. The animosity that has been described between pickleball and tennis lies with the tennis community, as pickleball is fine with them. But we have experienced numerous times a very Trumpian-like bullying and racial slurs, which, while we were trying to play and set up. Most of the tennis players were not even Palm Springs residents, which was apparent at last meeting's public comments. There is obviously a shortage of resources for everyone, and it's time to seriously address this lack. On a side note regarding the stinky methane gas smell at Duluth, has anybody ever looked up what the side effects are for methane gas? It's a simple asphyxiate that displaces oxygen, so it's not good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Dean Mangione. I'm the USAPA Pickleball Ambassador for Palm Springs. I'd like to proudly report that 2 of our local pickleball members have earned gold medals at the California State Games on Coronado Island in men's doubles 3.0 on July 6th. Local artist and gallery owner Marconi represented Ruth Hardy Park Pickleball, and his partner James Koo represented James O. Jesse Pickleball Gym, and they will now be extended an invitation to pre-register for the 2018 National Tournament, where they will represent Palm Springs as national state champions. Last Saturday, we held our second pickleball referee training school at James O. Jesse, where we rent the gym for 6 hours to train referees for our upcoming tournament. So far, we've trained 30 referees on our way to 200 referees by November. We're also now teaming up with Loma Linda University Pickleball Club to train referees on their 29 pickleball courts on campus alongside their tennis court complex. On August 1st, open registration will begin for the 2018 National Pickleball Tournament at the Tennis Gardens, and the USAPA expects it to sell out within hours, over 2,000 available spots. At that time, players will be making reservations for hotel and travel. Without enough courts in Palm Springs at this time, we'll be forced to recommend the national players make plans down valley, or we'll have to tape existing courts to handle the overflow. As reported in the Desert Sun, the descriptive words used by members of this commission last meeting were very telling of the attitude I've experienced while trying to expand the sport of pickleball in Palm Springs. Using words like inundation, takeover, and infiltration to describe the citizens' use of Ruth Hardy Public Park is illustrative of the exclusive bias of some of the members in this room. These courts belong to all citizens of Palm Springs. In addition, to intentionally misrepresent the false claim of sticky tape and that tennis players are sticking to the tape has now been proven false and is a gross misstatement of the truth and attempt to discredit our group. It's dishonest and incredulous to say at a public hearing that is defacing public property to tape pickleball courts when you use the same tape, safe release, 3-day stick, high temperature premium painter's tape used repeatedly at Duluth Park outdoor pickleball courts and on the hardwood floors at the pavilion for years with no problem. But now, when it suits your purposes, the use of the same tape at Ruth Hardy Park is being reported publicly as a defacement of public property. Your double standards need to be re-examined, and I demand a retraction. The fact that the Commissioner would publicly state that we have to stay out of Ruth Hardy Park and to safeguard the tennis at Ruth Hardy Park is troubling. Such an exclusionary declaration by a Commission member is disappointing because we're requesting an equal allocation of public resources and equal access to our taxpayer facilities. To exclude a specific group is unfair, unsportsmanlike. It is not what Palm Springs or the Palm Springs JOJ Unity Center is all about. For the 4th time in this city, we have proven, once again, if you build it, they will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Are there any other speakers? We will close public comment. The first item on our agenda is the discussion on the skate park agreement. Vicki?
We've come to the end of our first year, 5-year agreement with Action Park Alliance, who manages and operates the skate park for us. And we are now looking at entering into another 5 years with them to continue operating the skate park for the city of Palm Springs. Those of you that, for a little background history, when we first opened the skate park, it was staffed by city employees. And all we really did is everyone had to have a membership. They were based out of the swim center where you did some modifications to that office. They'd come in, they'd show their card, they'd leave it at the window. Staff would buzz them in to go skating. And it continued like that for several years. Back in 2008, when the previous director came, she felt that we would get more participation if we didn't have an entrance fee into the park. And so city council waived us charging fees to use the park. And during that time frame is when we started having all the difficulties of the drinking, the drugs, the major graffiti. There were a number of occasions where we actually had to shut the park down because the graffiti was so bad it took city staff 2 to 3 weeks to get it cleaned up. At that time, we brought in a security guard to help oversee the park. And unfortunately, we didn't have much luck with the security guards because they were also partaking in activity with the skaters as well. Got to be their buddies and started hanging out with them and, drinking and smoking with them as well. Mark Lowy, who's with the Action Park Alliance, actually had spoken with the previous director back in 2008 about coming and operating our skate park. And once Sharon left, Mark resurfaced and we started our conversations. And prior to them having a building there, they actually literally came in and started running that facility without a building in the heat of the summer with canopies and a big evaporative cooler to try and cool everybody down. And in October of 13 is when we entered into the first 5-year agreement, and that is expired actually at the end of April. And now we're back to look at continuing, if the commission so chooses, to continue an agreement with them to manage and operate the skate park. Mark is here to answer any questions. He also has a little video he wants to show you of some of the things that they've done over the past few years and what's happened at the skate park.
Great.
This is just a highlight video, about 2.5 minutes of things that happened over the last 5 years, from ground zero, ribbon cutting, to recent happenings in the last 6 months.
The last 4 years have made, with Action Park Alliance, has made tremendous improvement in the park. Prior to that, the park was operated by city staff, and all we really were doing was letting the skaters in and out of the park, monitoring who's coming and going, but really no programs and no events and things going on. And when we brought Action Park Alliance on to manage and operate the skate park, the amount of activity that has gone on in this park is 100-fold, 1,000-fold times what we previously had, between just skaters coming in and the Friday night jams they do, and the competitions, the big events they brought in, the Elgato, the summer camps, the winter camps. I mean, it's just, the programs have just been phenomenal, and I think they've made a large improvement in our skate park.
So we've gone from next to minimal events at the skate park, previous as being here, to Tony Hawk being here multiple years in a row, major events, major magazine, industry coverage, all the way to Palm Springs Resorts was sponsoring the events because it was attracting that many hotel visitors. From our previous year that was run by security guards to our first year of operation, we decreased police calls over 80-something% to the actual skate park, and somehow 65% in reduction to the swim center too. So there's a dramatic reduction in police calls. We've been handling maintenance, graffiti abatement, which we've only had one graffiti issue, which when we first got here, and I literally cleaned it myself. And since then, we've had no graffiti issues in the last 5 years. So all the problems literally have, not all of them, we can't eliminate everything, we've eliminated a majority of most of the issues the city was having previous to us being here. And we've got staff that's been tenured that have been here since day one. 75% of our staff has been here since we opened it day one, and they enjoy their community and their jobs and what we do here. And it's a special environment that we've been able to create with the partnership with you guys. So hopefully we can continue on with the 5-year option in the existing contract.
And when we entered into the agreement 5 years ago with the Action Park Alliance, at that time, minimum wage was $8 an hour. And after the first 2 years of the agreement, Action Park could come back to the city and ask to negotiate a higher rate. But just being a good neighbor and showing good faith, they did not do that. They took it upon themselves and continued paying their employees even though minimum wage has gone up. And currently right now, minimum wage, because of their number of employees they have, is $10.50 an hour. And by 2022, we should be around $15 an hour projection. And not only do you have just their line staff that's handling the counter and stuff, but he also has a couple managers that that manage the park. So obviously they're getting paid a little bit more than the line guys. They've come back asking for an increase in their agreement, and as you can see, it's there for this coming year. They're asking for an $8,000 increase, again, to help subsidize what they've incurred over the last 5 years in minimum wage increases. Year two, they'll have a 3% increase, or the consumer price index increase, which is ever greater, and then the last 3 years will all be based off a CPI increase. So, again, we're recommending a 5-year extension of the agreement, beginning actually July 1, which has been a few days ago, going through June 30th of 2023. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer, or Mark is here to answer if need be.
Yes, Commissioner Navarro.
Just one of my questions is on the programming in Exhibit B, where it says TBD, like the camps and the lessons and the contests. Are those, if those become part of the skate park, would they be within the next 5 years? And if they are, would that mean additional staff to run those, or would we use who's currently there to run
I think
those?
what was put in there was, at the time when we entered into the agreement, we really didn't know what kind of events they were going to do. And so one of the big events that they've done and have been doing for a few years is the El Gato. And that is the big event where we've had all the pros come out, Tony Hawk and all the big name pros coming out. Last January, I think the first year we did the event, it was in the fall. And last year's it's been kind of in the January, February timeframe. They do skate every number of Friday nights throughout the month. They have a Friday open skate. It's free. They do competitions. They cook hot dogs. You saw in the video they were cooking hot dogs. They actually ran a big bike event a couple months ago with one of the local bike shops out of Palm Desert. And so they have the TBD because they don't know exactly what all events are going to come in. So they've been doing events, have done events every year since they've been under contract with us, and I look for them to continue doing those types of events.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Goodman.
I actually don't have a question. I just would like to make a statement. Vicki, this was really well done. Thank you very much. I spent a year and a half ago looking at the skate park, doing interviews, talking to people, talking to staff, talking to users. It's a great little space that you provide, that the city provides, that our vendor provides. And I thought this was very, very well done and very consistent with what we have found when Carol, Les, and I went out and explored.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Goodman. The only question I had, and it may be for Mark as opposed to you, Vicki, is the revenues associated with working in this space. What are they coming from? From the events, from advertising? Because I noticed in the very first video, there were a lot of names that were shown in the video, and I just wondered, is that advertising?
I don't think charge for advertising, but a lot of there is coming from what their sales in the pro shop.
Okay.
You know, boards, clothing, lessons, camps. You know, they've been doing our summer camp for us the last 6 weeks. That's part of our regular camp. So their staff's actually, you know, we have a percentage we pay them for running that camp for us. So.
And has every commissioner here been on the skateboard park and on a bike in there, in the BMX bikes and stuff? Have you all had a chance to do that yet?
On an actual bike?
Yeah. I bet you
We're
Mark
not
would
actually
entertain
riding
any
it
of us
themselves,
to
but-
partake.
Yeah.
When I was there, I'm afraid of height, and looking in the bowl, I was like, I'm afraid looking down there, so. I would say you're looking for direction on this. I'd like to entertain.
Going to city council tomorrow night for hopefully approval. So in my staff report to council, I've stated that is coming to the commission today. And we will report out to what your decision is on moving forward with the skate park operation.
Great, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'd like to, first of all, say, I think it was like 2012 when you started talking about the skate park, and everything you said is really even so correct with the conditions there and all the work that this commission did in 2012 and 2013 to get this contract. It would be a shame not to extend it. So I'd like to move that we extend it for 5 years on the terms outlined by staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Armstrong. And a second to that?
I'll second.
Commissioner Goodman. Thank you very much. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Anybody abstaining? 5-0. Or actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Thank you.
7-0. I'm missing one. Congratulations. Vicki, a discussion on the recreation fees.
As you know, we've been working on this the ad hoc committee's been working on this probably at least 4 or 5 months. They worked on it at our, I want to say, it was at the April meeting when we approved the ad hoc committee's recommendations. After that was done, we met with the City Council Budget Ad hoc Committee to review fees, and Chair Young was involved in a few of those meetings. And before you is really the final recommendation of the City Council Subcommittee of where they think our fees should be. Their biggest thing was they did not want to increase any fees to residents. They felt that the non-residents should be bearing that cost and not our residents. And to the extent of resident, we're terming residents as someone who lives in the city of Palm Springs, someone who works in the city of Palm Springs, and or their child attends a school in the city of Palm Springs. One of Palm Springs Unified School District schools located in the city of Palm Springs. When we had the discussion of, wanting to do everything across the board, the big issue was having all of our memberships fees be the same, which was a big increase to what Desert Highland currently charges. So the decision was made, and the page that you have, it has the fees on it, the proposed budget fees. As you can see, our membership fees are going to be going from $52 for a family, $35 for an adult, and $19 for a youth, to all those fees will be $5 if and when this goes before council. They did not want to increase the fees at Desert Highland, but they still wanted the fees to be all the same across the board. So their recommendation was that the membership fee be $5. The non-residence fees, as you can see on the recommendation, is there will not be any family memberships. An adult would pay $95 a year, and a youth would be $25. So as you can see, a little bit different. There was a lot of discussion on the original proposal of the sliding scale, and it just came back to, who's going to maintain the paperwork and who's going to verify and what are we going to require. And council was just saying, let's just make it simple. Our residents will have one fee, the non-residents will have another fee, and we'll just kind of go from there. So this is really what has come out of the meetings we had with the City Council Ad hoc Committee. And if you notice in the staff report, I did talk about what the fiscal impacts were. Really not too much of a difference, and this was based off of using 16-17 revenues, and in 16-17 all the recreation revenues were $284,413. Keeping the resident rates the same as they were and increasing the non-residents for this coming fiscal year, and not knowing how many would fall in that category of going to school in the city of Palm Springs or working in the city of Palm Springs. We just did resident, non-residents. So our total revenue would be $312,037. So not a big difference between what we brought in, the previous year to what we would potentially bring in this coming year, and that could be less when we look at the resident definition. The biggest thing I look at is in membership fees and from Recreation at Leisure Center. In the past year, we brought in a little over $33,000 in memberships. With this new rate, we'd bring in about $4,000 just for residents alone, not including non-residents. So a big difference in the revenue there.
Before we go to a motion, I would like to apologize to Commissioners Armstrong and Pace in his absence for a lot of the work that we did. I would tell you that I thought we were operating with the direction appropriately, and in fact, the direction council took was different. So I have learned from this experience that in the future, in addition to any direction that I get from staff, and I don't mean Vicki in that particular case, but staff in general, I will be going to request from council what your expectations are before we begin the work, because I will tell you, Commissioner Pace and Armstrong and myself did a great deal of work. We've put in many, many hours on this, and we thought we put together a really, really good program that was manageable. And I don't disagree with what City Council is doing. It is absolutely appropriate for them, but it would be easier to swallow had we not spent, I would say, 40 or 50 hours minimum. And there, you know, I mean, I remember Commissioner Armstrong having to attend a meeting while he was away by phone with us, and then another meeting where he had to review the tapes so that he could be kept up to date. So there was extraordinary work that was done, and I really appreciate it, and I apologize that it didn't move in the way that we had hoped. But I do feel strongly that it would be in our best interest to move forward with that as a learning lesson. And I would say to us all, as we experience working within city government, that we look to the real source of the decision makers to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. Are there, what I'd like to do then, I guess, is get a motion and a second, and then we can have conversation.
And this, I may have one more comment too. We're not sure when this will be going to city council because David wanted the commission to provide their input. Then it could go back to the budget ad hoc committee to review what the commission is recommending and then how they want to move forward with moving it to city council, so.
Great. So if we may have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we move to accept the recommendation of the council for the fee structure as they have recommended.
And actually, it would be the subcommittee.
Yeah, okay, right. It's the
Yeah.
subcommittee recommended.
And a second on that?
Great.
Commissioner Navarro. And now for discussion. Commissioner Diaz.
Vicki, could you just reiterate to me again the $5, what's included in that $5? Like, it was Palm Springs residents, and then what were the other?
So Palm Springs
identifiers?
resident, if you work in the city of Palm Springs, say you live in Cathedral City, but you work in the city of Palm Springs, you would be considered a resident, and we've got criteria of what we would need to qualify that. And then, or if your child goes to Raymond Cree or Cielo Vista or Catherine Finchie or Vista Del Monte, one of the schools that's in the city of Palm Springs, then you would be considered a resident.
The consideration there, the subcommittee felt that if children were playing together at school, they could play together here and there would be no separation.
And we were looking at too, because, you know, we have them, you know, the children we pick up for our after-school program, we're picking them up at all those different
At the
schools.
schools,
And even though they don't necessarily live in the city of Palm Springs, they're attending a school in Palm Springs, so.
One other thing I would mention is my commitment to you all is to go to now Desert Hot Springs as well as Cathedral City, where I think the majority of our children are from, and talk to their Parks and Recs commissions and let them know that there will be a substantial difference and that I am asking their commission to speak with council in their city to determine if there is a way to cover this spread. Because here in Cathedral City, there aren't many programs for their children. And so that's my commitment to you, that I will continue to go to those meetings and attempt to get a recovery, because I do feel there may be families who don't work in Palm Springs, but their children do come here, and they may have multiple children, and this kind of a change could be substantial for a parent. And I'd like to see if we can help them to understand how it could be done in a way that would not impact them. Are there any other questions or concerns, or if not, if we could take a vote?
Could I
Oh,
make
yes,
a comment?
absolutely. Commissioner, good.
And so I just want to Vicki, you said it well, and that was the numbers of anticipated revenue, the 312, is really based on if we retained every single head count, like every person, right? And so when you had said that our fees right now for membership fees were 30,000 and it would go to 4, should these numbers change because it becomes cost prohibitive for some people, then that 312 could easily go down. Of course, we won't know until the end of the year and we do our accounting.
Right, and like I said, that number was based off of, say we had 1,000 members, memberships, and 400 was non-residents and 600 was residents. Of those 400, I don't know how many would be considered a Palm Springs resident based on where they worked or their child went to school. So I just did the calculations based off, I have 400 non-residents, this is a fee based on children, adult families, this is 600, so we calculated it. And now, like you said, the number could drop because if based on, if we thought there were 100 kids that were going to be non-residents, but 50 of those kids ended up being residents based on where they went to school, then that would drop the revenue, yes. Yeah.
And so we could actually even go under 284.
We could.
At what point would you know that information?
We won't know. We've just started taking registration for our fall, for after-school program, because school starts in 2 weeks. So our first 2 weeks, and that was one of the things that council was the ad hoc committee was very adamant about, that Palm Springs residents be given priority registration for our programs. So we just started registration today. So all residents can come in today for the next 2 weeks, and then on the 31st, we'll allow non-residents to come in and start registering for the after-school program.
Because, I mean, my reason for asking is...
It'll probably be a good, maybe by the end of the year, we might have a pretty good idea where we are at in revenues with
as far as
memberships.
December.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we look at certain timelines so that we can do an assessment. Should we have to, if we start to fall short and actually go below last year's numbers, then there's somewhere we need to find a place where we make up for that deficit. So I think it's really important that we put in some sort of infrastructure or a reminder on a calendar or something that says, look, by November, we really should have some idea and move into December so that a decision can be made.
Well, the thing to remember is this is an annual event. It's not a 5-year contract. So obviously we're going to be back at the table looking at this, probably early in the early in the year next year to look at it. But I think having some measurement in place is a very
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see what the numbers are by the end of October to see where we're at, or the beginning of November. I would hate for this to all of a sudden be sprung on us.
Well, we also have to remember that some of this is cyclical around summer camp. You're not going to see the income until next June/July. So, some of that's going to fall into timing, and I don't think we should get too comfortable with. I think we do have to do some projecting as well. I would say.
And if you look at the last page of the staff report, the last comment that I made, it talked about one of the things that the ad hoc committee recommended was that we keep the budget the same. We're not doing any increases in expenses, and we would take a look at the budget at mid-year and determine, review it and adjust it if they needed to. We'd come back to council and say, look, we've done this fee adjustment, and now we're this down in revenue, and do we want to continue moving forward, or do we want to make some adjustments mid-year? So.
Yes, Commissioner Diaz.
This is my question out of ignorance. If someone's using public parks, they don't pay any membership fee? It's only if they're going inside facilities?
Yes, as of right now, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioners, are you ready for a vote? Let's take a vote. All those in favor of supporting this fee structure? Aye. Any opposed? Any absent?
I'll abstain.
Abstain. Good. 6 and 1, or 6-0 and 1. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to discussion on pickleball courts. We have an ad hoc committee report. Unfortunately, I couldn't review that report prior to today because of the number of people in the committees. I really can't look at anything relative to it until you discuss it with all of us, or it would be a Brown Act issue. So I couldn't look at it. So I'm ready to listen at the same time as everybody else. I apologize, but just so you know.
So was that one of the reasons we didn't get a response to our email?
Yes, at least for me.
It's almost a moot point. So if I may speak for us, if that's okay, Commissioner Coronado and DS and I, we had a conversation, and that was a conversation that was really based around the July 15th deadline for restriping or
Blended lines.
What is it?
Blended lines.
Blended lines, that's correct, thank you very much, for the blended lines. At that time, Commissioner Coronado went out to pickleball community and asked a few general questions so that we could come up with some sort of direction or suggestion prior to that July 15th invitation to have the USTA pay for the blended lines. And so we did that successfully, sent an email on July 9th, and it got lost or didn't get opened and responded to. And so I would think that we missed that deadline. And I will just read just for the record and for public, and then I'm sure we all have a lot of comments about pickleball. But let me please, is it okay if I read this?
Absolutely, please.
Okay, very good. So the Pickleball Committee met and discussed the dilemma at Duluth and Ruth Hardy Parks, taking into consideration the July 15th blending or striping deadline. The subcommittee would like to recommend the following based on the striping application that was presented at the last meeting, which was the June meeting, during public comments. This would be the suggestion. All the courts at Duluth Park be striped for pickleball for maximum play. And then there are some conditions that pickleball would defer to tennis players. For the far court, should tennis players show up to play, that the tennis players would have first right of refusal for that one court. So there does seem to be a community that enjoys tennis at a variety of different hours, not consistent with pickleball. So that would be the recommendation, is that we would hope that pickleball would defer to a tennis player or players should they want to use that one court. That pickleball has access to all the indoor space at Duluth and at the Jesse O. James Center. I believe that's a continuation since they have that use. At this time, pickleball would be prohibited at Ruth Hardy Park. So it increases the use of the pickleball courts and for pickleball playing. Johnny did talk with pickleball players, and I just have some comments here, just a few that he received as he spoke to some of the people in the community. And I believe he had 20 interviews. All people were very happy with the fact that the subcommittee and the commission was willing to move forward. 2 people were not happy that Ruth Hardy would be off limits. They were all in favor of turning the courts that are in Duluth into pickleball courts. There was a request from the pickleball community for shade and an area that is a buildup of sand that seemed to be a possible place for injuries, that we look at that. I will say that this is an immediate and temporary suggestion and solution. This is not long-term, and it would not be something that would be final. It is for right now, for temporary, let's get moving. And I hope we didn't really miss that July, personally I'm now speaking, I hope we didn't miss that July 15th deadline, and I would like very much to be able to contact them and see if they would be able to extend it, since our meeting is on the 17th.
I'd like to ask a question, because as I read through that form that I had seen from, regarding blending, I believe that it was a 1-for-1. So it's a tennis court that can be blended by putting on lines for one pickleball court, not multiple pickleball courts. That's not quite the way I heard you speak it.
You know, I don't have the form, and I did not review that form, and so.
And we interpreted it as that they could blend in
The entire
court with pickleball lines. That's how we took it, and perhaps we were wrong.
And my only concern with that is 1-for-1 doesn't solve our problem.
No, we were looking for 4 on each court,
Correct.
which would give them 8 extra courts.
That would be our recommendation.
And unfortunately, you can't, with an existing net, now interrupt that net and have it be one day pickleball and one day 4 courts. If you thought about it, could you switch one of the existing 4 courts to a single tennis court? It's not possible. My hope would be, and I get an impression from City Council from the last meeting, that they would like a recommendation from you for a strong solve, or from us for a strong solve. And in my mind, if that means we need 8 more courts, that's what we should be saying.
So-
now, that could be, we've asked Vicki, and I think she may be prepared to talk to us today about the cost, because at a point in time, I had hoped we could just build 2 new tennis courts and convert the 2 tennis courts to 8 more courts, giving us 16
That's
courts.
what we spent all that, Carol and I, doing, yeah.
Right, but some of it comes to, could it be done, what would the cost be, and are vendors willing to convert courts? I'm hearing a little bit of angst from that, so Vicki, could you
Well,
talk to us?
before
Can
you
I
do
just
that?
ask,
Yeah.
I just want to ask another question as well. Dean, if there, am I allowed to do that?
We can't
Okay.
entertain Dean,
If
unfortunately.
you're on a tennis court, they have those portable nets that I see them use at James O'Jesse that they bring out and set up on there. Can they set up 2 courts on one side, leave that net in the tennis net up, and set up 2 more portable nets on the opposite side, which would still
So I've
give
seen
you the
that,
4
and that
courts?
was where I think the
And then
3
the
of us
tennis
were.
net stays and it's
Right.
permanent. They drag the
Right.
stands with the net on and off for their extra 4 courts on each court,
So-
and you're not destroying a tennis net or a tennis court if in case somebody shows up. That's, as a
I think
physical
that was the
educator, I'm pretty sure
interpretation
that works.
that we were under the impression that we would do.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to, may I say something? You said something, Chairman, that is interesting. So and you might have spoken with someone in City Council. So City Council doesn't want, they want a stronger solution or a direction, not something that's quick and temporary and we could get in by July 15th. So it really brings, for me, something similar to the dog park. When I first joined the commission, the experience that I personally am having with pickleball and tennis feels very similar to dog park. And at that time, Parks and Recs and the city council created an ad hoc committee and dug deep into what would be needed to provide the community with what they were requesting. And even though it might not have today been the best solution, it was a well-thought-out solution with the number of people and the people at the table. And I would suggest that we request an ad hoc committee from the city council and Parks and Recs to develop and design a solution for this. Otherwise, we might end up in the same situation that you found yourself with programs.
Well, based on the fact that Council Member Holstage said she was expecting from us a recommendation that would stop the behaviors that we've had at Ruth Hardy Park. I'm not sure that, based on the fact that I think they have 60 subcommissions, meetings that at least from what I've pulled out of their directory 3 months ago. That scares me only because I wouldn't want to push something off because they're just not available. We could certainly try that. I'm open to it. But I was actually hoping maybe something stronger than temporary conversion.
Possible 2 new courts being built and
Well,
Duluth.
What I'd like to hear is what the costs are, because if we're talking about $1 million, then let's back off and get temporary nets. But if
That'd be
we're
your
talking,
Taj Mahal. After our last meeting, I started doing some research and calling a few of the vendors around town, and it's kind of ironic. The first gentleman I talked to did court construction, and has explained to him what I was looking for. That the fact we have, tennis courts, and the concept would be either we take and convert those tennis courts, or we build new pickleball courts and leave the tennis courts as tennis courts. And probably in less than 5 minutes in conversation with the guy, he says, "You're going to take a tennis court, and you're going to drill holes in the concrete to put nets in." And I said, "Yeah, that's the concept. That's what we did before." He goes, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be involved if you're going to damage the tennis courts." Okay. So on to the next vendor. Someone I'd worked with before. He actually did the court conversions for us. His recommendation is not to build tennis courts, but to build actual new pickleball courts, was his recommendation. So the cost to build 4 pickleball courts, and I didn't do it with lighting, just the courts with fencing, was $50,000. If we wanted to build 8, you're looking at $100,000.
Is that, and shade, it wasn't even enough, that was just the courts.
Just the courts, but I didn't talk about shade or anything at that point, because I don't know if they would do the shade. We'd have to go to somebody else for shade. And it's a shade mean we're going to have shaded area where we'd have benches, bleachers. We just put shade over the bleachers to provide that for the participants. And even to the point of not just Duluth, but maybe we add pickleball courts somewhere in some location at Ruth Hardy Park. That way, those who live in that neighborhood still have access to be able to go and play pickleball if they don't want to travel to Duluth. Just the same as we kept the 2 tennis courts. If one wanted to play tennis, they could go to Duluth and play tennis. So that's kind of the numbers I had. I think Councilmember Hossteg was kind of looking at something like that. So what is the magical number? Is it 200,000? We're going to put in maybe 12 pickleball courts. We could put 8 at Duluth and maybe 4 at Ruth Hardy. Is there going to be some angst if we don't put as many at Ruth Hardy as we do at Duluth? I don't know, but at least it would give those that live in that neighborhood 4 courts to play on. So I guess it'd be up to your decision on what direction you'd like to go, and maybe make a recommendation that City Council look at.
So
Come out with the funding
so
to-
should we believe that City Council will budget this?
That was my question.
That's the feeling I got from talking with Christy, was that she was going to support
And
this.
timeline for that?
Would depend on how quickly they would want to
So then
allocate the
maybe,
funding.
the recommendation really is that the subcommittee of Parks and Recs meet with the pickleball community and come back with a proposed solution.
when I tell you there's, again, I can't undo what council has done, but I brought a page, and I don't have it right here, but there was a $50,000 increase to budget for
Staff.
an individual to man the courts. at
Right,
Duluth
actually, there was
Park.
$100,000 increase allocated to, and I started working on that today as a RFP to look at basically someone to monitor the tennis courts and pickleball courts. First priority being that Palm Springs residents have priority use of the courts during season when it's being monitored. And I'm going to be starting working on that, probably trying to put it together and try to get it to the budget ad hoc committee, hopefully by the end of this month, so they can review if that's what they want in it. If there's something missing, we can, put that together, so.
My thought would be, Ruth Hardy Park has always taken care of itself very effectively, and the Duluth Park pickleball people have, they have an entire process for getting on, and there's sort of a rules thing that they do. It's very, very organized. So my thought would be, if there's $100,000 without benefits, and that we would say, wow, that would solve part of our problem right here. I have been looking at this for 2 years, and would love to have separate tennis courts and convert, only because I've heard from all parties who are involved, which are pickleball and tennis people, that they'd like to be a little bit removed from each other. They don't want to be elbow to elbow because there's just a different style there. So it seemed to me that you got 4 tennis courts, if you could convert those and build 2 new courts, it really could work.
So, and I had said last month that, you know, maybe we just really look at a pickleball center. And so, and knowing city government, it will take 6 months or more to get a pickleball center or to get that 100,000 or 150,000 actually established and spent and up and running. And so it really, I appreciate that. Like we had said, our immediate solution is not a final solution, but it is something that can accommodate all of the players in the morning. And so I love that, and I do think the city council is getting new sources of revenue, and opportunities should be increased. This is a great place and a great way to spend the extra money that they have. And I still think we should meet with pickleball to map out where in the parks and what that could look like and how many courts, and come back and make a more solid recommendation.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Yes.
Was there a reason he gave that he thought it was better to build 4 new pickleball than to convert the 2?
He didn't, but I think the fact of, I think there's sometimes if you look at the courts, there's some difficulty when you actually, and maybe this is why the gentleman had difficulty with us digging into the courts to put the post in for the nets, is that those areas seem to have a tendency to start, having some problems with
Grading.
But if we're not converting back and forth, I can see a big thing of keeping them separate for noise, for camaraderie and all that, and that's why I didn't know whether that was a major problem to do that or not.
He didn't really say. He just said his preference would recommend to be probably easier to build the pickleball courts from ground up than even though obviously it's more costly than converting. But then again, if you're going to build new tennis courts, are they going to be lighted, and that increases your cost? You're going to have higher fences, which increase your cost. So, now your tennis court may cost you
More than a
more money.
pickleball.
Well, one of the things that I did hear in all the times that I went to pickleball is, like tennis, there's a community. With pickleball, there's a community. So I was hearing we would like to be able to have sanctioned and unsanctioned competitions. And today, we have just 8 pickleball courts, and we do a little taping and renting a court to get an additional, so they get to 12 courts. But it kind of concerns me that, and I apologize, that they all be together in one community, that if you start to split them up to multiple parks, then they can't really accomplish their competitive thing that is really a part of what they're attempting to do as a community. Not that we have to be the resource that Indian Wells will be with 40 courts or whatever, but it tends to be a community thing. If I drive by there at 6 o'clock at night, I see sometimes 40 or 50 players playing and people waiting to play even at night. If I go by at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's the same thing. There's a community there. So I don't know. I would say the subcommittee should look with would it satisfy to be separate? I kind of am liking your idea now of hard striping, and although I can't imagine, I'm not a tennis player and I'm not a pickleball player, but all those lines, if you were able to do 4 to a single, maybe a little confusing, but
Would be.
right, and
It's a very competitive tennis community.
yeah, Ruth Hardy, yeah, I'm open.
I had shared with my ad hoc committee, I played many sports growing up, and if you're on a court in a gym, it's not just lined for basketball, it's not just lined for volleyball, there's a whole bunch of lines on that court, and you have to adapt and learn where your lines are and do the,
Can I ask a question?
do with that.
Is my memory correct that there is a court at Duluth that is a tennis court that is also lined for, I believe it's.
Pickleball.
Oh,
The
I'd heard
Far
it was
East court
badminton.
has overlay.
Is badminton,
Badminton would be
No.
another,
oh, it is
Seven
pickleball.
courts.
Yes.
So there's a single painted court for pickleball on a
On
tennis
tennis
court,
court, yes.
which would have to be obliterated if you were to come back and do
put 4.
4 and 4.
Right.
And my only thought is if there is a way to try to ease the issue and get something on those courts quickly so that they can be used for both. And again, as if a tennis player shows up, pickleball gets off, and they bring in their nets, you know, what do you call them? Not permanent, but the standards and stuff. And while the city council takes this process that they will take of whatever our recommendation is for building new courts, permanent courts, because we know that will take a long time, and as we know, they're looking for a more rapid, at least fix for now.
So we all know that pickleball's not going away. So, you know, I think that we should do something with the courts over at Duluth. What we can do, convert them over, get at least that one,
That
not
done.
the east one, but the one in the middle, convert that over to 4 courts. That's gonna take the pressure off of Ruth Hardy Park. The community is strong. I've spoken to over 20 of them, and they're very comfortable, but we gotta move this forward. We gotta just make a move, and then bring it to the city council and take it to the other direction. I'd love to see a Little Valley, you know? There's
Can
one
it-
and there's one in Mesquite, or Cedar City, one of them cities, and it's amazing.
St. George.
St. George. So it's an idea.
Well, I think, if I may, and I want to go back to something that has been said time and time again, and I mean, with a master plan, pickleball would never have been on it because 7 years ago, pickleball didn't have the volume and the velocity that it has. But I want to incorporate surveying and really talking to the community, as has been suggested by Miguel many times in the past. I will say that as thoughtful and strategic as the commission and the city council was with the dog park, we find ourselves in the same situation with the dog park as we did 4 years ago. And it would, even though it would be nice to have a resource center and new courts and restrooms and shade and everything else that they would need, it would really be a shame if 3 years from the time that that investment was made, it doesn't accommodate the velocity of it. And for a very small amount, in addition, 3 years prior, to grow it so it could be a sport we could grow into, and then ends up costing us 2 times or 3 times the amount. So I just want to make sure that we take the time to really look at option A, B, and C and make those recommendations. I think we could probably have those recommendations by September.
I would say, I come from the corporate world. I didn't grow up in the government world, and September seems like a lifetime
Forever.
away. So let me ask a question and ask how you all feel about this. We are dark, or we're planned to be dark in August, and I don't know that we. Yeah, as a commission. So let me ask you this: would the subcommittee consider making a recommendation to do the temporary conversion of the 2 courts that are today tennis courts to a temporary a temporary correction? It would have to be painted, so there's going to be some cost associated with it. But they would use the temporary nets so they could go back and forth. Would you consider a meeting at the Duluth Center with the tennis and pickleball people from that community? Because we do have, and I know Travis will remind us, that we do have a community, albeit small and not a professional community of tennis players who play at that park, and said they wouldn't be allowed on the courts at Ruth Hardy because they just weren't good enough and they didn't want to be, pushing good people off. So this would be an effort, because I know that the pickleball people would be very supportive of pulling off that court if somebody came along with rackets in hand and said, or tennis players. But is that, what I've said, is that something?
That's what she said.
That's what we said,
Can
yeah.
you read it again?
Well, yeah, except I thought you were talking about the free striping. The free striping, I do
Well,
not
I would
believe.
like to pursue that.
Well, what I'm telling you though is the free striping is a single to single. It is not 4 courts on a tennis court. And that's not what you're asking for, right? You're asking for 4 courts on a tennis court.
Yes.
So it's not free. It's gonna, what they were saying is to be able to use both is a 1-for-1. And that would, I don't think,
So they'd pay for 2, so. So that would pay for 2, and then we'd pay for 2.
no, I think what they said is, we will come in
Okay.
and stripe 1
Okay,
court.
we'll relook at that.
I don't find that in there. I'm just trying to think of.
Okay.
It might be past the deadline too.
What is,
I'm gonna call them and see if they'll open that deadline for us.
so based on that, is the subcommittee willing to make a recommendation today rather than waiting till September? And what would that motion be?
Can I just say one more thing? My suggestion of September was for a long-term solution and not a temporary solution. And that is just because cities are dark in August.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think in the next few weeks, we could have many meetings with the pickleball community and have, I think we'll need a little bit of time for a more permanent solution. So that's where September was.
Right, so my solution is a interim solution. Is that something that everybody would entertain?
I would.
But it kind of depends on the answers that we might get when she calls for the deadline, right? I mean,
Well, my thought is if they could pay for 2, that'd be great, but if
It
not.
shouldn't inhibit our.
Yeah, we could go
Yes.
forward.
I'd like to make
I was just gonna do it, go ahead.
to move forward with.
You're off on your mic.
So I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with the blending and the striping of the 2 courts at Duluth, knowing and asking that the pickleball leave the far east court should tennis players come, and that they would have first right to use that court.
Can we get a second?
Oh, I second.
Was that motion, I'll start the questioning, was that motion 2 tennis courts to be striped as 8 pickleball courts?
So that would be 2 tennis courts to be striped as 8 pickleball courts. Thank you, Chairman.
Questions from the commissioners?
I mean, I'm really reluctant to support this because, you know, we aren't reaching out to the tennis community, and I do believe effectively you're turning that court over. I don't think it's going to work that pickleball players are going to get off the court. It's going to just lead to more problems amongst the 2 communities. But I do have a question. When did we first add our pickleball courts? Was that like 2 years ago, or?
I'm gonna say 3 years ago.
Okay, and how many do we have in outdoors now?
We have 8 total. We took the 2 far east courts and converted. We did the far west one first. We did the 4, and after that, after, I don't know, a year or so, they came back and asked for the city to convert another one. We went to council and got authorization.
Right, and that was because the pickleball community came to this meeting and asked for it, and I see our former chair, Craig, who championed that. So I do want to go on the record, I think there's been some misrepresentations about this commission, how hard it's worked to add that many courts in that little time. I've been coming to every one of these meetings, I think, since 2010, and it took, I don't know how many years to improve the dog park. So, you know, this commission, in my view, has really worked hard to support this activity, and I think the record shows that we really have. And so for people to come and say the things they've said and is this, I think, misrepresenting the commission and how we've really worked to add this sport to our kind of palette of recreational activities in the city.
Thank you, Commissioner Armstrong. Commissioner Boley.
I get a feeling that the council would like us to move forward with not only changing this over, but recommending that they add 2 tennis courts. And, you know, the worst that council can say to us is no. So maybe we should add 2 tennis courts and convert the 2 tennis courts to 8 pickleball and build 2 new tennis courts. Bring it to the council. If they say no, well, we start all over, but if they may say yes. Maybe we should amend it and ask them for the 2 tennis courts.
Well, and I think we could do that as a separate motion, but I think the motion that's here right now is a good interim motion. But I think you have a good point, and I mean, and I think once you get the contractors involved, I mean, it may turn out that the 2 courts could be built to the west of the existing courts instead of where we'd originally talked about it, and then it could just be pickleball courts because it would be on the west side. But you know, my thing right now is, should we continue to discuss this motion or take a vote, and then I would entertain a second motion on a more permanent
Call for the vote.
solution. So let's call for
One quick question.
Sure.
Vicki, what was the cost of converting that tennis court over 3 years ago?
10,000 and I think $200 because for one, to take 1 court and convert it to 4.
Build new.
Build new.
Yeah, okay.
You're bringing up one other point. Let me just ask one, and I don't know if you know the answer to this. Are these compression, what are the courts called? Compression? It's cement.
Surface?
Yeah. The reason I'm asking is, are they, as soon as you start breaking into the center
concrete.
of courts,
It's concrete,
That's why we were saying to use the portable
portable nets.
nets, so you're not drilling into anything.
no, but I'm even looking at,
Oh.
well, actually, that'd be a second motion. Forget it. I apologize. My question's answered. Are we ready to take a vote? All right, all those in favor of moving forward with the motion that Commissioner Goodman did, I was thinking it was Boley. Aye?
I,
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? I have to say, Travis, I didn't hear your.
He raised his hand.
It was, okay, thank you. So it is,
And I will make this phone call, see what we can get.
so we're good with the first. Now, the second motion, Commissioner Boley, did you want to make a suggestion on a long-term direction?
As a long-term, that we ask the council to build 2 new tennis courts in Duluth Park, separate from the existing ones, and convert the existing 2 tennis courts now to 8 more pickleball courts
permanent, mm-hmm.
Second.
permanently.
Second, Commissioner Armstrong. All in discussion, I'm sorry. I was ready. I'm always for solutions, right? Any discussion? So based on what you were talking about, does that satisfy your need, Commissioner Goodman, or were you?
Well, I don't have a need, and so,
She's a tennis player, I can't.
no, I don't have a need. I don't know if it would satisfy anything from Ellen, or, you know, as a commissioner. I think the question really has to go back to the pickleball community. And that goes back to what Commissioner Armstrong said, and again, what Miguel continues to say, and that's really talking to the community. Does it really satisfy the community? It doesn't have to satisfy me, but I think it has to satisfy the community. And so I like the motion to say that then there would be 16 permanent pickleball courts should the council make a decision to build 2 new tennis courts. that's what we've heard. Did we do the surveying? Did we ask people? Do we know what the growth is? Are we going to be back at the same conversation 2 years from now? I totally agree with Commissioner Armstrong. The hostility, the name calling, the coercing, the bullying from both sides is so sad and very disappointing. And so I would like to build a solution where everybody can be at peace and satisfied. So it wouldn't be up to me, it'd be up to the community.
Well, and I think that we've heard from the community loud and clear. And I will say, as Commissioner Holstitch did, a personal friend of mine was approached. He was a pickleball player. He was approached by somebody who was a tennis player and asked for his papers. That is not what we do in the city of Palm Springs, and I hope not in this country. But to be asked as a man of color, an Egyptian man, if he had papers, it was pretty disgusting. So we're definitely not going to have stuff like that going on in our commission. Really didn't want to talk about that today, but it really does affect me because that's not acceptable. So
I just have one more comment, though.
Yes.
I agree with what you're saying 100%, but this path we're going to check people's ID, we're getting to that point. And, I wish that idea would come to the commission for a recommendation or not, rather being initiated at staff or council level. But it doesn't seem that that's the path we're going on that issue.
Well, I think we may be able to address that, though, Travis, and I agree with you that kind of checking is it does raise issues.
Right. And the biggest, Councilmember Corsa's big thing, and through all the meetings we've had with him, is our Palm Springs residents should have priority use of all of our facilities. And that was part of the reason, obviously, he must have some people that have come to him about issues with trying to get on the Ruth Hardy courts. And so this is really, I think, where it kind of spearheaded his thought of trying to get funding to have someone there to monitor those courts and making sure that our Palm Springs residents are getting priority use and not all the people coming in from, all over the country during season and tying up our courts when the residents are having to sit and wait. And so, again, their focus seems to be catering to our residents and not so much the
But are we
non-residents.
going to be using a definition of residents that we're using for the memberships? That if somebody says they have kids in school here or they work here, are people going to have work IDs, or is it a more restrictive definition of residents?
Well, for a residence, normally what we use for the golf course, driver's license, voter registration card, utility bill, tax bill, a lease agreement, a minimum of 1 year lease agreement they have to have with the Palm Springs street address on it. I'm trying to remember the criteria for a person who may work in the city, a check stub, maybe a letter from their HR department. There were a couple of little things they're asking that would prove they worked in the city of Palm Springs. And then obviously a student is documentation that their child actually attended Catherine Finchie Elementary School based on either the report card from the end of last year and, the fact that obviously if we're going to pick them up at Catherine Finchie and they get on our van, we know they're going to school there.
Call it. You can do that. Yes.
But what if the child goes to Catherine Finch? Does that make the parent a resident so that they can use the tennis courts as first priority?
No, it does
if they live
not.
in Cathedral City?
No, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
It's only based on the child being the resident, to be in the program.
Thank you. I want to move this motion, or I want to move this topic. We can pick up some of the questions. We have about 10 minutes, and some people have a hard stop at 4, and a few more things on the agenda I'd like to discuss.
We call for the question?
Yep.
Call for the vote?
So a vote, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? 8-1, or 8-0 rather. Great, the last item on the agenda is the the request to rename the ball field number 6 for, at Duluth Park.
This was an item that Commissioner Coronado asked to be put on the agenda. We've had several discussions at previous meetings regarding it. And I believe in his conversations with Councilmember Halstig, she wanted to know what the commission's take on it was. And so we're back to have this discussion, and is it direction that the commission wants to move in, to then move forward, I guess, with a recommendation to city council for the renaming of field number 6 to country field number 6 in honor of Jared
Yeah. Jared Doherty.
Doherty.
Great. I would just like to mention that I have all the documentation on naming of things, and there is really no true record in the city other than when Ruth Hardy Park was named Ruth Hardy Park. It had previously been Tamarisk Park. I forget what the Sunrise Park was, but was renamed Sunrise Park. There isn't anything. The only thing I did mention to Vicky today was that I had remembered Demuth, so I ran over there and took a picture of Demuth Park. Actually has a field that is named the John Williams
Field. So the 4
field.
Little League fields are called the John Williams Fields.
So that was not done, to the best of my knowledge, in anything, that is recorded in the city. So I just wanted to indicate that there is nothing that says
No
that we
protocol.
cannot do this. My real concern initially was whether or not we would get somebody like a very large corporate concern to come in and make a huge donation and have the entire park named in their honor. And that isn't anything that's on the table. And even if that were the case, I don't think it would preclude doing something of this nature. So if you would like to make a motion, and I guess I would ask Vicki, if a field were named, how would it be denoted?
Well, the only other time really this had come up was we had a number of years ago. One of the ball players was diagnosed with cancer, very young. He was early 30s, and passed away. His friends came to the council asking to name the field in his honor, and at that time, council wasn't willing to let them name a field. But they did allow them to put in a rock. If you go out to Field 7-8, there's a rock that's got a plaque in honor of Joe Winters. So, they didn't name a field, but they allowed his friends to pay for a plaque. It's been embedded on a rock. It's been there for, God, I don't know, 20.
Almost 30.
Yeah, almost 30
30
years.
years.
So, but field-wise, no, there's not been any of the fields. I know that youth baseball during their seasons, because of sponsorships, they may call this, field number 1 is the, Joe Smith Field, because Joe Smith Plumbing sponsored somebody in the league. So they'll refer to it that way, but officially there hasn't been any.
I think the family is okay no matter how we go about it. So, just naming that field after that boy would really
And really,
spark it up.
His name is not in it. It's just they want to call it Country Field number 6. It's not the Jared Doherty Field. It's Country Field number 6 is what they're requesting the field be changed to.
Can you set Commissioner?
Well, we do have a mechanism to honor people. At the dog park, we work so people can sponsor a bench. Both of those fellows were friends of mine, and I could have come to this board and asked for you to name the dog park after those 2 people. There's a bigger issue here. We have no policy. I mean, are we ready to open up the floodgates? I mean, every week, Vicki could get a request to rename a field, or rename a park, rename whatever. In the world I work in historic preservation, we have standards that the government has written that we have to, if something is deemed to be recognized. And so I understand, and it might be very hard for commissioners to say no to but we need a policy and a standard first. Because are we just, everyone who comes in has a worthy cause or a worthy person, we're gonna say no to them or yes to them and name things? I mean, this is a little different because it's not the person, but why that name for that field? Does it fit into some standard or policy we have? I mean, the city's already gone through this controversy with these stars downtown because there were no standards, and now suddenly, I think of that when we're thinking of this. And I can think of some very important Kuya people that have nothing named for them in this town that I would love our park named after. So, I mean, I would support us coming up with a policy and telling the city council that we want to come up with some kind of policy and then apply that policy to these requests. And also list the alternatives that people can do to honor people that are departed through benches and plaques and things like that.
Commissioner Navarro?
Yeah, and in addition to that, a couple years ago, maybe we had some folks come up to us. I think it was a swim center or the pool, and I feel bad because I don't think we gave them any direction, unless I'm mistaken. But there was also some person's name. I don't know if there was an athlete that.
Right, Tracy McFarland, who was a local, was on the Olympic team, went to the Olympics representing the United States and went to Palm Springs High School. And one of her former coaches had come to the commission asking the commission to name the swim center after Tracy. And I believe at the time, and I believe Commissioner Armstrong brought it up at one of our later meetings, stating that when Jay Thompson was here, his comment was really that was an issue for city council to take up because there was no policy in place and it wasn't really something the commission should be doing. But
So is it more appropriate for Johnny to go up during public speaking at city council and recommend that?
Well, wasn't Councilmember Holstich here when we had that discussion last
right,
time?
and
She
had asked
left it
that
up to us.
a recommendation come from the commission
She
on
said-
what you would
yeah.
like to see done, and then she would, you know, move it forward if it could be moved
But I think
forward.
Commissioner Armstrong's got a point about coming up with a process. I don't think it deters what's happening here, but maybe that's what we do. And what I will do is ask you to put this on the next meeting's agenda, because at that time we will have new commissioners on board, and we can have a three-person commission that will include, start to engage those commissioners as well as our existing commissioners. And at that point in time, we can work on the process and the structure rather than the field. I think that, Travis, you have a great point, Commissioner Armstrong.
Add to, I mean, we had at a retreat the city's grant development director, and it is going to be coming for us probably renaming or naming rights. And I could envision us having a subcommittee that we are proactive in that, rather than just being presented that what we would think would be appropriate and not appropriate if they start selling naming rights, and so have a policy on that as well. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'd be able to do the whole city, but I think as far as parks and stuff, I think that we should put together a recommendation that could in fact become, I don't know if it has to become an ordinance or how we would recommend to the council, but we could make that recommendation out of the commission. So I really appreciate your forethought on that. And if you can just put that on the agenda for that time, that'll move us forward. Real quickly, if we can do a round robin for each of the commissioners to discuss commissioner comments and requests, and if you have any updates on any subcommittees or ad hoc committees that you're participating in, or on the park that you're ambassador to, that would be great. We can start with Commissioner Armstrong.
Just real quick, I wasn't able to attend the meeting, but the Sustainability Subcommittee is working on the recycling containers in the parks. They met, I think, last week or so. So we should have some news on that by the next meeting, I think.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Diaz?
The restroom ad hoc committee will be meeting next week to discuss, just beginning our discussions about the public restrooms in the city parks. And as far as James O'Jesse goes, I don't have any new information. That's my park that I'm an ambassador for.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Caldonado?
Everything seems to be going pretty good at Duluth Park. Other than some of the holidays, people driving their trucks up on the grass, and they're pretty good about cleaning up their mess, but that's pretty much the only thing, and I'm always over there looking around and just keeping my eyes and ears open, so seems at this time, that's pretty much it.
Relative to driving on the grass, Vicki, is there anything that Commissioner Caldonado could do? Is reporting it to the police?
Reporting to police is against city ordinance to be driving vehicles across city parks
Don't
up on
entertain
grass
yourself,
parked.
but
Right.
I would recommend, and you can call a non-emergency number.
Because there's a lot of it, a lot of times they're just parking, undoing their chairs and coolers and stuff, but some of them are just parking along the oleanders right there and just leaving them there the whole day, and it's like, really?
That's how we break the sprinkling systems, which
Yeah.
cost fortune to replace. Thank you. Commissioner Navarro.
So just very quick, if this could help you out, there's an app that's called Palm Springs at Your Service. And I've used it before, and you could track new issues, old issues, and you could take pictures, and they'll address something from graffiti to something like that. Palm Springs at Your Service.
Commissioner Goodman.
Okay. So, a big shout out to Vicky and her team. I saw that the large dog park had signs. So I thought that was pretty great. I did go over there this morning. It looks really good. I like the benches. Everything looks super great. I did snap a photo while I was there this morning because there was someone with their dog on the baseball fields. They just didn't seem to want to go to the opening, the gate next to them. I have no idea why. You know, it really brought something up for me that, you know, build it, they will come. No, build it, they'll go where they want. I mean, I was so surprised. There is a huge area. It has absolutely everything. It was a very large dog. They were having a great time, and the gentleman was on his phone. I have photos, and he was on the inside of a playing field and tossing the ball with his dog. And I was really a bit disheartened. I was kind of disappointed. And so that saddened me. That was over at Duluth Park. I don't really know what to say or do about that kind of stuff. And I think that that's a problem across the city, is people will just do whatever they want to do. So I'm the ambassador for Sunrise Park, which I take a tour of every single week. And what I have found, interesting enough, is the residents in Sunrise Park tend to not use those recycle bins or the trash cans. And I've taken multiple photos. And I felt badly. One guy had his little encampment, and somebody went through all his stuff and threw his stuff all over the place. And he must have been a Virgo. He came back. Everything was moved, and he was really upset. But it was unorderly, and he was outraged, and people go through other people's things. So Sunrise Park, as gorgeous and beautiful as it is, it does get some uses as far as the playground and some of the other, the basketball courts at night. But it's become pretty populated, pretty heavily populated. And there's not a whole lot of community use outside of some evening basketball and every now and then kids on a playground, or of course what camp provides. And yeah, I've taken a lot of photos, and I don't know if it's at your service, but I do think that at some point we should really have a conversation about what to do with Sunrise Park. And I know that a couple of subcommittees have had conversations, and I'd like to start moving those conversations forward. I'd like Sunrise Park to really be reinvigorated and re-engineered to a really usable space for the city.
That sounds like a topic for the September meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Commissioner Boley.
Nothing more at this time.
Okay, before we go to Vicky real quickly, camp is moving along very, very well. I got to stick my head in this week and see an officer, and I forget his name, but I do remember Boomer's name, who's the dog that really did a great showing for the kids. He's one of the dogs that works on the police force as a bomb sniffer. And amazing dog, and the kids had an amazing time. And once again, I'd like to thank your staff, Vicki. They are phenomenal, and the volunteers at camp are really remarkable. And I have to tell you, if you can stop by at any point in time and just stick your head in, you should clear it with Vicki ahead of time, or Rosa. It's pretty remarkable to see our kids having a great time, and they do. I saw these little munchkins going swimming, and just it was remarkable. Some kids going to skate camp, some kids working on stuff, and they're hosting various events. It is very touching to see, and it is remarkable. So kudos to your staff. Staff?
Last day of camp officially is August 3rd, but since they don't go back to school till the 8th, we'll still have a camp on that Monday and Tuesday. Yeah.
Great. That's all I have. Vicki, anything from staff?
Just a little bit of update, just, Chair Young made a comment about camp. This summer, we've been really inundated with children, more than we've had in the past. We're over 290 kids right now registered for camp, averaging about 175 a week. So you can imagine going and buying and providing snacks for that many kids twice a day. I mean, school district is providing one of our snacks a day for us, so that helps out a little bit. But the numbers have it's just been crazy. And the fact that it's over in 2 weeks is unbelievable, that seems like we just started.
What do you attribute the growth to, do you know?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's just maybe just word of mouth of people, because we really don't do any advertising. And I think maybe more, we had a big, with our tiny tots, we had a lot of them that graduated. Out of the 30, we had about 27 that graduated, so they're, going up and down. And this summer, we created a new camp for the little ones. Instead of being tiny tots, we made it Camp Chicopee, which is what camp was years and years ago.
Yeah.
That's what it was called. And so, and we're averaging about 20 kids a week in that program. So it's going really well. There was somebody with the school district was doing something with Digicom and trying to teach the teachers how to do videoing stuff. And one of the moms, who's one of our campers' kids, really did a video, and I was hoping Rosa could get it downloaded for me, but it's on her phone and we couldn't get it. But it was a video they made of camp, and one of the kids started out like he was the weather guy and saying, it's hot today, and tomorrow it's going to be a little bit hotter, and the next day it's going to be hot, 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 and the next day it's going to be extremely hot, and then the next day we're going to be able to fry eggs on the sidewalk. And then this went into this whole thing about focusing on one of the kids who actually started as a camper and grew up, and now he's a volunteer this year. So it was quite interesting. So, yeah. So things are going well.
That's great.
I guess one last thing. Tomorrow night at the council meeting, besides the skate park agreement, the agreement with the school district is moving forward. And so we'll be on there for council's consideration.
Does that include our entire recommendation and motion that we be included in the evaluation of extending the contract past a year, or?
It was, the way it was put in there was that they would review it, the commission and staff would review it annually.
Commission meaning
Commission.
Parks and Recs.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, with that being said, it's the end of sort of the season, and we are going to take the month of August and be dark. I want to thank you each for all the work that you've done. At our next meeting, we will have election for officers, and I just want to thank you all for working together. It has been a remarkable year, and I feel honored to be able to work with you. So thank you very much. And with that, we will resume on September 18th at our next Parks and Recreation Commission. Thank you very much. Meeting closed.